I'm confessing tonight because in 3 hours, I'll no longer be able to live with the fiction I've carefully constructed for the last 4 years, and I need someone to know the complete truth before the news breaks and the world decides what I am based on headlines alone. My name is Sienna Welker, and I am not the person you see behind the bar at Meridian every evening, mixing perfect martinis with a practiced smile and remembering every regular's drink preference like it's the most important detail of my life. That version of me is real, but she's only half the story. The other half, the part that's been conducting a systematic dismantling of someone's entire existence, that's the Sienna nobody has bothered to look for. Because beautiful girls who serve overpriced whiskey to Wall Street executives aren't supposed to have master plans. We're supposed to have dreams of modeling agencies and Instagram followers, not law degree ambitions and court filings. I grew up believing that structure meant everything. My father was a district court judge, and my mother was a documentary filmmaker. Our dinner table conversations didn't revolve around gossip or sports statistics. They centered on what justice actually meant, how truth could be manipulated through perspective, and whether the law was genuinely designed to protect people or just to maintain the power structures that benefited those who already had it. My father believed the system worked. My mother spent her career proving it didn't, at least not consistently. I was caught between their worldviews, and I think that's why I ended up where I did, needing to be both of them simultaneously. By the time I was 24, I'd already built the career most people dream about. I was an investigative journalist for the Metropolitan Report, a nationally recognized publication. I wasn't famous yet, but I was hungry in the way that matters, the kind of hunger that makes you work 16-hour days without noticing time passing. I'd published 8 major investigations into corporate fraud, healthcare malpractice, and government corruption. My editor, Martin Calloway, had taken me under his wing when I was just an intern. He told me I had a gift for seeing through the noise to find the truth that everyone else missed. He said I was fearless. He said I would change the world. Martin was 52 when I was 24. Brilliant. Connected. Married with 2 grown children. He introduced me to editors at the Washington Post. He pushed my work for journalism awards. He became the voice in my head telling me I was good enough, smart enough, brave enough. When he told me about the Riverside investigation, when he said this could be the story that made my career, I didn't question it. I couldn't see what was actually happening in front of me because I was too busy being grateful. The Riverside investigation was supposed to expose systematic elder fraud at one of the country's largest healthcare management firms. For 6 months, I conducted interviews, obtained documents, verified sources, built an airtight case. Martin edited every piece. He reviewed every allegation. He gave me direction, strategy, timing. Together, we created a narrative that was not just true, but absolutely bulletproof. The story was going to run in 3 days. 48 hours before publication, Martin came to my apartment. I remember what I was wearing, a gray Columbia University sweatshirt and pajama pants. I remember the wine he brought, a Sancerre I couldn't afford. I remember thinking he was there to celebrate, to tell me that awards were already being discussed, that universities wanted me to speak. Instead, he told me that everything had to stop. The investigation was dead. When I demanded to know why, Martin sat on my couch, the same couch where he'd once told me I was going to win a Pulitzer, and he explained that Riverside's parent company had connections to one of the publication's primary investors. A call had been made. A decision had been rendered. The investigation would destroy that investor's portfolio, and therefore it would destroy the publication's future, and therefore it would destroy my future if I continued. He was so calm about it. That's what I remember most clearly. He wasn't uncomfortable or apologetic. He was resigned in the way that people who've made peace with corruption become resigned. He told me this was how the world actually worked, that I was talented enough that I could publish this story somewhere else if I was willing to be a martyr to the cause, but that I should consider whether martyrdom was really worth the cost of my career. He suggested I shelve the investigation, work on something safe for a few months, and then maybe revisit my ambitions once I understood the practical realities of journalism. I didn't accept his advice. I took the investigation to 4 other major publications. Every single one of them turned me down. I later discovered that Martin had called editors at each publication, warning them about me. He told them I was unstable, that my sources were unreliable, that I was trying to push a biased narrative. The man who had been my mentor, who had guided me into this career, methodically and deliberately destroyed my ability to do the work that had become my identity. What hurt worse than the professional sabotage was the personal dimension. While simultaneously destroying my career, Martin also made sure everyone at the Metropolitan Report believed that I was unbalanced. I went into the office the Monday after he told me the investigation was dead, and I could feel the shift in how people treated me. Pitying looks. Shortened conversations. An assignment got pulled from my desk with a vague explanation about workload redistribution. Within 2 weeks, I was essentially frozen out. Within a month, I resigned. The legal implications were murky. Martin had technically done nothing illegal. He'd expressed concerns about my work. He'd made editorial decisions. There was no written evidence, no recorded conversation, nothing that would constitute defamation or tortious interference in a way that could hold up in court. My sources at Riverside were protected, but they were also terrified of being identified, so they wouldn't come forward to support a lawsuit. My father, who could have guided me through the legal options, simply told me that sometimes truth wasn't actionable, and that was the hardest part of being a judge. I was 25 years old, and my entire professional identity had been methodically dismantled by someone I trusted. The story about Riverside eventually came out, not from me, but from a journalist at ProPublica 18 months later, using different sources and a slightly different angle. It won awards. It led to investigations. It resulted in 3 executives being prosecuted. Everything I had discovered, everything I had worked toward, became real anyway, and I got to watch it happen from the outside, knowing that I could have been the one credited with change. The depression that followed wasn't the clean, cinematic kind. It was the kind that made me stop answering my phone, that made my apartment feel like a coffin with windows, that made me question every instinct I'd ever trusted. My mother found me in that apartment 6 months after I resigned, still in my pajamas at 3 in the afternoon, and she didn't lecture me or try to fix me. She simply sat with me for 4 hours and told me that Martin Calloway had just destroyed the wrong person, because I was made of the kind of material that either breaks into a million pieces or gets shaped into something sharper. She was right, though not in the way she meant. I didn't break. I transformed. But the transformation wasn't into someone better or stronger or more resilient. I transformed into someone new, someone who had learned that the legal system was a tool that could be used or ignored depending on who wielded it, and that the people with power got to decide which rules applied to them. I became someone willing to play the long game. The first thing I did was change my entire life in ways that looked like giving up but were actually calculated. I got my bartending license. It seemed like the ultimate defeat, and that was precisely why it was brilliant. Nobody looks at a bartender with suspicion. Nobody thinks a girl who mixes drinks for a living is conducting a 4-year intelligence operation. But bartenders have access to something powerful, unguarded conversations. I got hired at Meridian through a friend of a friend, and within 6 months, I had become indispensable. I learned the names of people's children, their anniversary dates, their business worries, their affairs, their addictions, their insecurities. I learned who Martin was meeting with and why. Martin started coming in every Thursday at 7 p.m., always ordering a Negroni, always sitting at table 7 by the window. He never noticed that I was often nearby, or if he did, he didn't register it as significant. I was furniture to him. Background. Invisible despite being visible. But I was documenting everything. Every meeting, every associate he met, every conversation I could overhear. I started a journal that I kept in code, a habit I'd developed during my journalism days. And more importantly, I started building relationships with people in Martin's extended professional network, not to be their friend, but to be their confidant. People tell bartenders things they don't tell anyone else. Over time, I became the person who knew everyone's secrets, which meant I knew Martin's vulnerabilities more intimately than he knew them himself. What I discovered was that Martin's editorial decisions weren't actually driven by investor pressure. They were driven by Martin's own financial interests. He had a consulting arrangement with Riverside's parent company, earning $100,000 a year as its strategic advisor. He'd made the decision to kill the investigation not because he was forced to by institutional pressure, but because he was personally profiting from Riverside's success. The man had sacrificed my career to protect his own income stream. This information alone wasn't enough for what I needed to do. I needed more. I needed evidence of the broader pattern, proof that Martin had done this before, that he had a pattern of compromising editorial integrity for financial gain, that this was systemic corruption, not a single ethical lapse. Over the next 2 years, I worked with a private investigator I'd hired with money I'd saved from bartending shifts. We obtained his financial records through proper legal channels, public filings, property records, court documents. We interviewed former colleagues who were willing to speak off the record. We found 3 other investigations that Martin had killed or delayed under circumstances that benefited companies paying him consulting fees. We found evidence of at least $5 million in undisclosed income flowing into accounts he shared with his wife. During all of this, I remained the invisible bartender. I graduated from bartending to becoming a manager at Meridian, which gave me even more access and credibility. I was trusted. I was reliable. I was the person who remembered how people took their drinks and never mentioned the conversations they thought they'd had in private. I was the perfect cover. The critical piece fell into place in year 3 when a journalist from a publication I'd contacted months earlier actually took interest in what I'd assembled. Jennifer Torres at The Atlantic was interested in a story about editorial corruption in major media institutions, about how financial conflicts of interest were shaping the news landscape. I didn't approach her as myself. I approached her through intermediaries, funneling her documents and connections, building a case that she could investigate independently. I made sure she had everything she needed to verify the story without ever being able to trace the information back to me. Meanwhile, I did something that required a level of moral compromise I'm still not entirely comfortable acknowledging. I reached out to Martin's wife, Claire, through an intermediary. Not to tell her about the affair, there was no affair, and that wouldn't have served my purposes, but to suggest that her husband's professional reputation was about to be examined in the media, and that she might want to consult with a lawyer about their financial arrangements. I was, technically, giving her a warning. I was also strategically placing doubt in the one relationship that might convince Martin to cooperate with investigators before things became worse. The investigation Jennifer began was thorough and devastating. She found everything my private investigator and I had discovered, and she found more. She interviewed colleagues who suddenly felt more comfortable speaking on the record. She accessed financial records that painted a picture of systemic corruption. Martin fought back, initially denying everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. The Metropolitan Report launched an internal investigation. 2 weeks later, Martin resigned due to personal reasons. 1 week after that, Jennifer's article published. The piece was extensive and damning. It detailed the Riverside situation specifically, showing how Martin had killed my investigation because of undisclosed financial interests. It showed the broader pattern. It quoted several sources, including people I'd connected Jennifer with through various channels. It included the financial records. It explained how editorial integrity had been compromised and what it cost the public discourse. It won a National Magazine Award. Within 3 weeks of publication, a federal investigation was opened. Martin's consulting arrangements were examined. The Metropolitan Report's editorial board demanded explanations for decisions that had been made over a 5-year period. Several advertisers pulled campaigns due to the scandal. Martin's reputation, which had once been pristine, became toxic. Former colleagues distanced themselves from him. His consulting income evaporated as clients terminated contracts rather than risk association with someone who was suddenly synonymous with corruption. But here's where I have to pause and ask myself the question that I still cannot answer with complete certainty. Was this justice, or was this revenge dressed up in the clothing of truth? The investigation that destroyed Martin was factually accurate. Every allegation in Jennifer's article was true. The financial records were real. The pattern of compromised editorial decisions was documented. From a legal standpoint, nothing that happened to Martin was the result of criminal action or defamation. From a moral standpoint, his exposure and the consequences that followed were proportionate to his actions. He had destroyed my career through abuse of power and influence. Now his career was destroyed through exposure of that abuse. Except that I hadn't approached this as a victim seeking justice. I had approached it as a strategic operator executing a plan. The difference matters, or at least I've convinced myself that it does. Every step had been calculated. Every connection had been made with an agenda. I had actively shaped the investigation, not by committing fraud or perjury, but by carefully controlling the narrative flow, by deciding who would speak and when, by predetermining the conclusion I wanted Jennifer to reach. She had reached it independently, using her own skills and judgment, but she had reached it on a path I'd constructed. Was that justice or manipulation? Was I a whistleblower or a vigilante operating within the bounds of law? Could I claim righteousness when I'd spent 4 years of my life engineering this outcome instead of simply telling my story and letting the truth speak for itself? The answer is that I'm not sure. I'm not sure I was ever sure. What I knew was that Martin had violated me and gotten away with it, and that the systems designed to protect against that kind of violation had failed. So I built my own system. I operated outside the law, but not criminally. I was ruthless, but not dishonest. I was vindictive, but only in pursuit of exposure of actual corruption. The fact that I couldn't have cared less about editorial corruption if it hadn't involved Martin doesn't change the fact that the corruption was real. 3 years have passed since Jennifer's article published. Martin's wife divorced him and moved to Oregon. He took a job at a small publishing house in Boston that he'd never have accepted before, a professional downgrade from which he'll likely never recover. His consulting income has vanished. His reputation is destroyed. His name is synonymous with corruption in media circles. I'm still here at Meridian, still mixing drinks, still remembering how people take their beverages. I own 10% of the bar now, a partner investment I made with money I'd saved, legitimately earned from tips and salary. I'm taking online classes toward a degree in business law. I'm 30 years old, and I'm building a life that is nothing like what I imagined when I was 25 and certain that journalism was my destiny. But I'm confessing tonight because Jennifer Torres called me an hour ago, and she told me something that has broken the careful arrangement I'd made with my conscience. She was contacted by a woman who claims to be a former research assistant to Martin, someone who says she was paid to gather information about me, to find out where I lived, who my friends were, what my vulnerabilities might be. Jennifer doesn't know if this woman is telling the truth or if she's someone with her own agenda, but she's passing along the information because she's concerned. Martin knew. Not the full picture, maybe, but enough of it. He knew that I'd been orchestrating his exposure. He'd been gathering information about me, which means he was planning something, though Jennifer doesn't know what. It means I never actually achieved what I thought I'd achieved, which was invisibility and control. It means I was never invisible, only underestimated, which might be the only thing worse. This realization has collided with something else, something I've been avoiding acknowledging for the past 3 years. I'm tired. I'm tired of living with the knowledge of what I've done, which is not illegal but also not innocent. I'm tired of the moral ambiguity. I'm tired of pretending that I'm better than Martin because I operated within the boundaries of law when I violated every boundary of ethics and decency in order to engineer his destruction. He destroyed my career. I destroyed his. The math seems equal until you factor in the years I spent building the destruction, the relationships I cultivated insincerely, the information I gathered through manipulation. He acted in a moment of weakness and rationalization. I acted with calculation and patience. Which of us is actually the villain here? What I want to say is that I'm confessing because I've found God or therapy or some spiritual awakening that has shown me the error of my ways. That would be cleaner. That would make me redeemable. But that's not the truth, and I've spent enough years with the truth to respect it even when it's ugly. I'm confessing because I'm scared. Martin knew to look for me. The woman Jennifer told me about had a description that sounded like someone who'd been in Meridian several months ago, someone I'd served drinks to without recognizing her as connected to Martin. She'd been taking photographs of me. She'd been asking questions about my background to other regulars. And now I understand that while I was orchestrating Martin's downfall, he was orchestrating a counteroffensive against me, and I missed it because I was so convinced of my own invisibility. I'm also confessing because I need someone to know the full truth before Martin gets the opportunity to tell it through his own lens. He's going to claim that he's a victim of an elaborate vendetta. He's going to say that I manipulated journalists into pursuing a biased investigation. He's going to say that while his decisions were ethically questionable, they didn't warrant 4 years of psychological warfare and orchestrated exposure. And the terrifying part is that he won't be entirely wrong. Here's what I know with absolute certainty: Martin Calloway compromised editorial integrity for financial gain. That's documented and proven. That's real corruption that deserved exposure. But here's what I also know: I didn't expose that corruption because I was a noble truth seeker. I exposed it because I wanted him to suffer for what he did to me. If his corruption had harmed someone else, I wouldn't have cared enough to dedicate 4 years to dismantling his career. The corruption was real, but my motivation was revenge, and there's a difference between exposing corruption because it's wrong and exposing corruption because you want to hurt the person responsible for it. So the question I'm leaving on record, the thing that will haunt me regardless of what Martin does next, is whether I've committed a crime or claimed a right. Whether I've done what justice demands or what revenge demands, and whether those two things were ever actually different in this situation. The legal system couldn't help me when Martin destroyed my career. The ethical systems I believed in didn't stop him from compromising editorial integrity. So I built my own system, and I used it to destroy him, and I did it all within the bounds of law and truth. But the fact that something is legal doesn't make it just. The fact that something is true doesn't make it right to weaponize for personal purposes. I've won. Martin's career is devastated. His reputation is destroyed. His financial security is compromised. Everything he built has been damaged, and I was the architect of that damage, and I did it deliberately over 4 years of calculated action. The victory feels empty in a way I didn't anticipate, like I've proven something about myself that I'd preferred not to know. My father called me yesterday, and I didn't tell him why. But I should have. I should have told him that his daughter has learned a lesson he tried to teach me, that sometimes the law allows things that justice wouldn't, and sometimes justice demands things that the law can't provide, and sometimes the person who fits those gaps is you, and you have to decide whether you're brave enough or broken enough or some combination of both to be the one who fills it. I'm confessing tonight because tomorrow, or next week, or next month, Martin is going to fight back. He's going to tell people about the research assistant, about the surveillance, about the fact that I orchestrated a vendetta against him. And some people are going to believe him. They're going to see me as a stalker who disguised revenge as justice. And the terrifying part is that they won't be wrong. I'm a bartender who spent 4 years engineering a man's professional downfall. I'm a daughter of a judge and a documentarian, and I've learned that the distance between them, between belief in systems and exposure of their failures, is the distance I've occupied, and it's a lonely, morally ambiguous place to be. I got justice. I got revenge. I might have gotten both, or neither, depending on who you ask and what you believe justice actually means. But I know this with absolute certainty. I'll never be the person I was before Martin destroyed my career, because I've become someone capable of things I didn't know I could do. And I'll never be innocent again, because I know too much about how power actually works, not in theory, but in practice, in the space between what's legal and what's right, in the years it takes to break someone if you're patient enough and ruthless enough and willing to pretend to be invisible while you're actually running everything around you. The confession is complete. The rest is for you to decide.